The best explanation I've been able to find of why Donald Trump won in 2016 came from friendly Jordies.
In the troll came.
And right below the tweet,
My fingers are long and beautiful. It's well documented. Total fact.
He's so insecure about his tiny hands.
the tweet below that would read,
The incompetence of our current administration is beyond comprehension. TPP is a terrible deal.
and that is how we got into the bizarre position where Donald Trump was the substantive candidate.
Now, the theory that Trump is winning because Trump focuses on substantive issues of policy while the left is focusing on trivialities is really interesting to me. And it's a theory that's slowly being cemented in terms of its veracity and its predictive ability. Case in point, let's look at John Oliver's latest episode.
Trump has made it clear that reality is not important to him.
Now, this is his thesis that John is going to try to defend throughout the episode. The idea that Donald Trump is at war with reality itself. Now, let's listen to the examples he gives to bolster that theory.
Think about it. He's exaggerated the size of his inauguration crowd.
Now, from what I can tell, this is basically a half-truth. While it is true that Trump's inauguration crowd was half the size of Obama's 2009 crowd, John phrases this in such a way to make the audience think that Trump was saying that his audience was huge and gigantic for no reason. What actually happened was that the media and the National Park Service started attacking Trump on the fact that the size of his inauguration crowd was half the size of Obama's 2009 inauguration, and incidentally similar in size to Obama's 2013 inauguration. And in response to that attack, the Trump administration started to argue, well, the size of the crowd was not that small. And notice that John Oliver does not present any clips or quotes of Donald Trump exaggerating the size of the inauguration crowd size, because he never did that. Again, he was saying that the size of the crowd was not as small as media made it look. And if you listen to his press secretary's briefing about the inauguration size, he pivoted away from the size of the crowd and focused on digital viewership, which is an implicit acknowledgement by the administration that the size of the inauguration crowd was small. And let's keep in mind what small is in this context. We're talking about 800,000 people in Washington, D.C. That is not a small crowd. It's only small relative to the crowd that was drawn by the first black president, the first and extremely popular president at the time. Any crowd is going to look small compared to that. But back to the key point here. Number one, this is a hollow criticism of Trump. Defending crowd size is not evidence of a break with reality. And number two, this is a triviality. This is the first thing that John Oliver cites to criticize Trump, and it's completely trivial. The size of the crowd doesn't affect anything. It doesn't affect your livelihood. It doesn't affect your political views. It's completely silly.
He said the election was marred by mass voter fraud with no real proof of that.
This is actually true. There is no evidence of massive, widespread voter fraud.
He also falsely claimed that compared to Muslims, it was almost impossible for Christian refugees from Syria to get into the US.
Now, this one comes down to semantics, but I'm going to have to go with Trump on this one. As NPR points out, of the 12,587 refugees that were admitted from Syria in 2016, 99% were Muslim. Less than 1% of refugees from Syria were Christian, which is consistent with Trump's claim that it is almost impossible as a Christian to seek asylum in the United States. And by the way, the PolitiFact article on which John Oliver bases this claim that Trump is lying about Christian refugees from Syria also cites the same statistic. Quote, Muslims make up 98% of Syrian refugees, according to PolitiFact, and even though they're only 87% of the population. And they also point out that Christians are 10% of Syria's population, and they only make up less than 1% of refugees. So Trump's argument that it is almost impossible for Christian refugees to seek asylum in the United States has an element of truth in it. It is not completely made up. And this is also relevant in terms of the discussion of the Muslim ban. Trump's current immigration plan seeks to give priority treatment to religious minorities, which, if we take into account the fact that Syrian Christians, which are a religious minority in Syria, make up a disproportionately low number of the refugee population that is going into the United States, it is not that unreasonable to give those people priority treatment so that the amount of refugees entering the United States is representative of the religious makeup of the Syrian population. Now, the direct quote of what Donald Trump said was, if you were Muslim, you could come in. If you were Christian, it was impossible. Now, a literal reading of Donald Trump's quote is true, is correct. If the if the odds of you entering the United States as a Syrian Christian refugee are less than 1%, then that is nearly impossible. PolitiFact, however, chooses, either for political reasons or whatever, that to declare this statement a falsehood, apparently based upon they interpret Trump's statement as meaning that U.S. immigration policy discriminates against Christian Syrian refugees. And they argue that immigration policy does not discriminate against Christian refugees on the basis that there is no overt discriminatory policy to discriminate against Christian refugees. But the fact remains here that the amount of refugees coming in is disproportionately Muslim. A disproportionately high amount of them are Muslims. So even if overtly the policy does not discriminate against Christian refugees, the end result here is a policy which results in a low number of Christians coming in relative to the population of Syria, and a high number of Muslims coming in relative to the population of Syria. So even though if de jure there is no discrimination against Christians, the current policy does result in Christians getting a unfair chance of entering the country.
Yes, he even lied about the weather during his inauguration.
It was almost raining. The rain should have scared him away, but God looked down and he said, we're not going to let it rain on your speech.
No, he didn't. First, it did rain while you were speaking. That's why your wife was holding up an umbrella and people behind you were wearing ponchos. We have a president capable of standing in the rain and saying it was a sunny day.
Now, this is hilarious for the audience, but it turns out this isn't actually true. Let's go to the tape.
It was almost raining. The rain should have scared him away, but God looked down and he said, we're not going to let it rain on your speech. In fact, when I first started, I said, oh no. First line, I got hit by a couple of drops. And I said, oh, this is too bad, but we'll go right through it. But the truth is that it stopped immediately. It was amazing. And then it became really sunny. Then I walked off and it poured right after I left.
Yeah, so it turns out Trump never said that it didn't rain during his speech. In fact, in the section of his speech which John Oliver cuts off, he specifically states that he felt rain starting to hit him as he started his speech, and then it cleared up. The irony here is that John Oliver has had to fabricate a lie by Trump by selectively editing his statement to make it look like he said that it never rained during his speech in order to accuse him of being dishonest, when in reality here, it's John Oliver being dishonest.
One reporter who's been covering Trump found himself saying this.
This is what makes covering Donald Trump so very difficult. What does he mean when he says words?
Now, here's the question. Is the problem that journalists don't know what Donald Trump means when he says things, or is the problem that they're not making the effort to try and understand what he's saying? This next clip should answer that question.
Because any policy discussion has to begin with a shared sense of reality, and Trump's reality can change within a single sentence.
When you hear 4.9 and 5% unemployment, the number's probably 28, 29, as high as 35. In fact, I even heard recently 42%.
Well, which one is it then?
Now, this statement by Trump is actually not that hard to decipher if you make the effort. The problem here is that the media and John Oliver is not making the effort. When Trump refers to the unemployment rate being 4.8%, he's referring to U3, which is total unemployed as a percentage of the labor force, which does not include people who have stopped looking for jobs. Then, when Trump switches to talking about the unemployment rate is as high as 20%, he's talking about U6 unemployment rate, which includes people who have stopped looking for work and also includes people who are underemployed, which would be people who are working part-time but are looking for full-time employment. And finally, when Trump talks about the 40% rate, he's talking about the labor participation rate, or rather the non-participation rate. 63% of the population roughly participates in the labor force, they're working, and the 40% do not. Deciphering what Trump is saying here is not that hard, but John Oliver doesn't even make the effort. And it goes back to the basic problem here. Trump is making a substantive argument. He's arguing that the official U3 unemployment rate, which is used by the Labor Department to track unemployment, is deceptive, and that it would be better to use other metrics. That is a substantive argument, and here John Oliver completely ignores his points, doesn't even attempt to figure out what Trump is trying to argue here, and discards it and laughs at him. That's why you lost the election.
Trump's lying is obviously nothing new. He has a well-documented 40-year history of bullshit. He lied about being invited on this show.
Yeah, it turns out Trump did lie about that.
And about the ratings for The Celebrity Apprentice.
Oh, this one actually surprised me, but it turns out that Donald Trump was telling the truth about the ratings on Celebrity Apprentice. So not only is John Oliver criticizing Trump for a lie about something extremely stupid, the ratings on a reality TV show, but it turns out it's actually John Oliver that's lying, not Trump.
He pretended to be his own publicist.
Yeah, that's actually true.
Even his building, Trump Tower, is not as big as he says it is.
He inflated the floor numbers. His 58-story building became a 68-story building.
This isn't actually true. What Donald Trump did was modify the floor numbers of his building. He did not lie about how big the building itself is. As the New York Times explains in detail, what Trump did was divide the total height of the building by the height of a standard floor in order to calculate what the actual height for a residential apartment would be if the floors were all the same height. Because the Trump Tower has a very tall lobby and commercial floors on the lower sections, if he used a standard numbering system, the apartments on the upper floor would be about 20 floors numerically lower, even though they have the same height as a standard residential apartment in another building. So it's simply not true what John Oliver is saying here about Trump lying about how tall the building is. The building is still the same amount of height. All he did was modify the numbers of the residential floors on the upper area.
Our gross domestic product, a sign of strength, right? But not for us. It was below zero. Who ever heard of this?
Okay, just real quick on those. No, it isn't. No, he didn't. And no one's ever heard of a GDP below zero because that is fucking impossible.
Now, I have to assume that John Oliver is just playing stupid here, because it's very fucking obvious that what Donald Trump was referring to was the GDP growth rate, which did in fact go below zero in 2014.
Even his own advisors, like Peter Thiel, argued that people shouldn't worry about his statements because he didn't really mean them.
I think a lot of the voters who vote for Trump take Trump seriously, but not literally. And so when they hear things like the Muslim comment or the wall comment or things like that, it's not, the question is not, are you going to build a wall like the Great Wall of China, or how exactly are you going to enforce these tests? What they hear is we're going to have a saner, more sensible immigration policy.
Oh yeah, that is definitely the sense I got from watching those Trump rallies.
Now this comment annoys me for two reasons. Number one, John Oliver has just been taking Trump literally for the last 20 minutes of the show, even to the point where he purposely takes comments out of context in order to make it fit his agenda, which I guess is anti-Trump. But on the other hand, he's completely disregarding what Peter Thiel has just said for absolutely no legitimate reason. And unfortunately, Peter Thiel's interpretation of Trump's success, which is that people interpret Trump's comments and promises metaphorically, or at least they accept the sentiment behind his policies, not the actual literal content of his policy decisions, is closer to the truth than whatever John Oliver is claiming here. Yeah, and it's not just Peter Thiel who has made this similar observation. Also, Scott Adams, the writer and creator of Dilbert, has also similarly argued that people do not take Trump literally, and that is part of his success.
And yet, the travel ban literally happened.
The travel ban literally did not happen. What Trump campaigned on was banning all billion Muslims worldwide. The ban that he has implemented so far is only limited to countries that are in the middle of civil war or who have completely collapsed, or countries that we are at war with. He has not implemented the travel ban as John Oliver falsely claims. In fact, the fact that Trump has not implemented the literal version of his travel ban confirms Peter Thiel's hypothesis of how Trump operates.
Now, he famously flubbed a question on the triad during an early debate in an exchange that ended like this.
Let's be honest here, most people don't know what the nuclear triad is, and Donald Trump, a man who has been working in the private sector his entire life, has no reason to know what the hell the nuclear triad is. And if he ever actually needs to know what it is, it'll be explained to him. I don't understand the point of this argument here.
They are nuclear weapons, not your children. What is her name, Donald? What is her name?
Now, this one seriously confused me because I haven't been able to find anything that says that Donald Trump does not know the name of his own daughter.
His tweets frequently echo things that just aired on TV. Just 2 weeks ago, he tweeted, "Ungrateful traitor Chelsea Manning, who should never have been released from prison, is now calling President Obama a weak leader terrible," which is interesting because Chelsea Manning never used the words weak leader.
Now, I understand that the underlying reason for John Oliver highlighting this tweet is to prove that Donald Trump gets his information from Fox News. However, that would only be a problem if Fox News was lying about the tweet or misrepresenting the tweet. And John Oliver here makes it look like Chelsea Manning never said that Barack Obama was a weak president. However, if we go to the actual tweet, what Chelsea Manning wrote was, "Take away from the @Barack Obama legacy, what we need is a strong, unapologetic progressive to lead us." In other words, what Chelsea said was that Barack Obama was not a strong leader, which is functionally the same thing as calling Obama a weak leader. Fox's rephrasing of Chelsea Manning's tweet did not modify the meaning of the tweet. So there's no problem with Donald Trump getting the information about the tweet from Fox News, because Fox News did in fact convey the information of the tweet correctly.
Also takes information in from frighteningly unreliable sources such as Breitbart, the organization which gave us Steve Bannon, now Trump's chief strategist. Breitbart has published such Pulitzer-eligible stories as birth control makes women unattractive and crazy, racist pro-Nazi roots of Planned Parenthood revealed, and hoist it high and proud, the Confederate flag proclaims a glorious heritage.
Now, the Pavlovian response to the mention of Steve Bannon is fascinating, but let's look at what is behind the disgusting headlines which John Oliver cites to prove that Breitbart is a bad publication. The first article Oliver cites, "Control makes women unattractive and crazy," which is, number one, written by a troll contributor, Milo, who basically writes provocative things just to get views. And number two, the actual article is just a clickbaity rewriting of a CBS News article site called Pill Users Choose the Wrong Sex Partners, as well as a second article from the Huffington Post women's section called Fertility Affects Women's Attractiveness. The second article, Racist Pro-Nazi Roots of Planned Parenthood Revealed, are about Margaret Sanger's support of the eugenics movement, which even PolitiFact had to concede was true, although they do point out that she was not overtly anti-African American. And the final one, Hoisted High and Proud, the Confederate flag pertains a glorious heritage, is the only actual problematic article I could find. Intends to argue that essentially the Civil War was fought not over slavery, but, quote, in defense of states' rights. But whatever negative criticism John Oliver is attempting to attribute to Breitbart.com as a result of them publishing an article in support of the Confederate flag falls flat the moment you realize that multiple mainstream and liberal news outlets have also published articles that defend the Confederate flag. For example, the New York Times on December 2nd, 2015, published the Confederate flag is a matter of pride and heritage, not hatred. Personally, I disagree with that. That's stupid. I do view it as a symbol of hatred. But the New York Times is not a bad publication because they chose to publish this article, and neither is Breitbart. What John Oliver is doing here is essentially an endorsement of a censorship, and the idea that you should be able to block certain ideas from being published at all.
A few years ago, Trump was challenged by Bill O'Reilly, who correctly pointed out that his claim that thousands of Muslims were seen celebrating in New Jersey on 9/11 was based on no evidence whatsoever. And this is how Trump responded.
Well, I don't know that I'm wrong, Bill. You know, this just came out from Breitbart. I mean, literally, it just came out. Trump vindicated, 100% vindicated.
Believe me, if there were thousands, that would have been reported. But
this
what I'm trying to
article
get at
says
is
they were swarming. Bill, this article says they were swarming all over the place.
Right.
So I don't know what that means, but it means a lot of people.
Wait. Holding up a Breitbart article does not make you seem more credible.
Now, unfortunately here, Donald Trump is probably closer to the truth than John Oliver is. John Oliver simply dismisses what Donald Trump is citing to support his argument because it's coming from Breitbart. But if you look at the Breitbart article, it's actually based on a New Jersey newspaper report, recent, which confirms that there were Muslim celebrations in New Jersey after 9/11. There were two celebrations, people yelling Allahu Akbar, women chanting in Arabic, men dancing, and there were people shouting in Arabic, a high-pitched wail of Arabic fashion, and a rooftop party of 30 Muslims celebrating 9/11 had to be cleared. So between the position of John Oliver, which is that there was absolutely zero evidence of Muslims celebrating 9/11, and Donald Trump's position that, oh well, it did happen. Unfortunately, Donald Trump is closer to the truth than John Oliver.
And Trump's sources get even worse because he also cited an article to support his Muslims on 9/11 claim from InfoWars.
Now, again, the InfoWars article was based on the New Jersey newspaper reports. So you don't get to dismiss the claims just because they were reposted by InfoWars.
That man is Alex Jones, and that is actually him at his most presentable.
There are a lot of legitimate reasons to dislike Alex Jones, but his physical appearance is not one of them. I mean, seriously, people link John Oliver stuff on social media like he's some serious journalist, and here he is arguing, no, this guy's wrong because he's fat and his face is red.
And then there is the Sandy Hook school shooting.
Yeah, so Sandy Hook is a synthetic, completely fake, with actors, in my view, manufactured. I couldn't believe it at first. I knew they had actors there, clearly, but I thought they killed some real kids. And it just shows how bold they are that they clearly used actors.
Now, that is not just offensive, it's stupid.
Now, this is just one hell of a cheap shot for John Oliver to try to associate Donald Trump with Sandy Hook conspiracy theories or Sandy Hook hoaxers, because he's never said anything of the sort. And it also mischaracterizes the relationship between Donald Trump and InfoWars. And I mean, normal, rational people may not like it, but unfortunately, InfoWars is a media giant right now. It gets, like 7 million viewers. Donald Trump did not show up on InfoWars because he endorses InfoWars' belief that Sandy Hook was a conspiracy or that they're trying to turn frogs gay. He showed up there because he needs their votes. He needs access to their audience.
Now, it was quickly debunked by multiple outlets, but despite that, days later, President-elect Trump started tweeting about millions of illegal votes and serious voter fraud in states like California. And by early December, people were on TV expressing similar concerns.
Voting is a privilege in this country, and you need to be legal, not like California, where 3 million illegals voted.
Where are you getting your information?
From the media.
Now, this to me really encapsulates the problem of why the left is losing to Trump and will probably lose the election in 2020. The media is focusing intensely on whether or not a million illegal immigrants voted, and focusing on the fact-based aspect of the story. But what Trump knows, but the media does not know, or they're pretending not to know, is that an overwhelming majority of Americans support voter ID laws. So even if he's basing this on false facts, he's still proposing a policy that a majority of Americans support. And in reaction to that, the left is not arguing policy, it's not arguing the merits of policy, it's arguing about trivialities and whether or not Breitbart is a racist website and whether or not InfoWars is a ridiculous website and the size of Trump's hands and the color of his skin. Only one side currently in American politics is making substantive policy proposals and discussing policy, and it is unfortunately the right. The left is wasting their time on stupid shit. In the entire 24-minute John Oliver Show episode, there isn't a single discussion of anything of political relevance. There isn't any policy discussion. There is so much material that they could be attacking Trump on. The fact that his healthcare proposals will mean that millions of Americans will lose healthcare coverage. His tax policy, which is disastrous. His climate change policies, which would literally destroy the planet. They're not talking about that. They're talking about stupid shit that he tweeted. And whether or not he's doing it intentionally, Trump is being able to make himself immune from substantive criticism by distracting the media with stupid tweets. And they're falling for it. And if they don't realize that shit, they're going to lose again in 2020.